The film begins on November 1st, 2004. Hank Deerfield, a gravel truck driver and a retired military police sergeant living in Monroe, Tennessee, is already an older man sharing his life with his wife, Joan. One day, Hank receives a call informing him that his son, recently returned from Iraq, has gone missing and has not reported back to base. If he does not return within a few days, he will be declared a deserter. Realizing that his son might be in trouble, Hank decides to go search for him at Mike's base in New Mexico. Before even leaving town, Hank notices a man near his house who had mistakenly hung the American flag the wrong way. The flag was upside down. The man did not realize that an upside-down flag is a recognized signal of distress, meaning that the nation under that flag needs help. Hank corrected the man and helped him rehang the flag properly. Upon arriving at the base in New Mexico, Hank is warmly welcomed by Mike's fellow soldiers. Mike had spoken highly of his father, so the servicemen treated him with respect. One of the base employees escorted Hank to his son's room. Without hesitation, Hank searched through the locker and quietly stole Mike's phone, cleverly distracting the employee by drawing his attention to the Bible. Although nothing was supposed to be taken from the base, Hank was determined to have his son's phone at any cost. After viewing the restored videos from the phone, Hank tries to report Mike's disappearance to Detective Emily Sanders, but she is preoccupied finishing up with a woman whose dog had been killed, and unfortunately cannot offer help. Hank then turns to a friend who had once served in the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, asking him to assist with the investigation. But the man had long been retired and now had only one goal in life: to peacefully enjoy his old age. Suddenly, news breaks that a badly burned and mutilated body has been discovered not far from the military base. Police officers arrive to investigate, combing through the area for evidence. They find various body parts scattered separately, most likely torn apart by animals. One of the careless officers points out that the land where the remains were found had been purchased by the military. Therefore, the matter falls under military jurisdiction, beyond the reach of the local police. The case is left for the men in uniform to investigate. The next day, a man in military uniform arrives at the hotel where Hank is staying. He comes carrying a folder of documents with clearly grim news. Spotting Deerfield, the officer salutes him and informs him that the mutilated body found recently is, in all likelihood, that of his son Mike Deerfield. Stern and composed, Hank simply responds, "I see." He then demands to be taken immediately to the site where his son's remains are being kept. Upon seeing the charred pieces of Mike's body, Hank, barely holding back the flood of grief, listens in silence as the expert delivers a horrifying conclusion. 42 stab wounds had been found on the body. Leaving the room, one of the officers asks Hank whether Mike had ever dabbled in illegal substances. Under the boy's mattress, a pipe used for smoking light narcotics had been found. Based on this, the officer tries to connect the case to the recent arrest of several soldiers who had been caught smuggling contraband from Kuwait into America, having previously arranged deals with a Mexican gang. It is possible that Mike was involved in the same business, and the officer wants to imply that his murder is connected to illegal drugs. Hank persuades Sanders to show him the crime scene. Once there, the former military policeman almost immediately reconstructs the sequence of events that had occurred after Mike's murder. His body had been deliberately dragged onto military property. Entering a nearby gun shop to question witnesses, Hank learns that a blue car had been spotted at the scene of the murder, but the police mistook it for a green one. Returning to Sanders, Hank reproaches the officers for not knowing that blue turns into green under yellow lighting. We are then shown the moment when Hank tells Joan about their son's death. Shocked by the news, the woman begins to blame her husband for the death of both of their sons. Hank had always said, "If you have not served, then you will never be able to feel like a real man in your own home." Listening to their father's advice, the children went to Iraq. The first son died, and the second one could not be saved either. Sanders, who is underestimated by her male colleagues and sometimes openly disrespected, convinces the local sheriff to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Mike's comrade, Staff Sergeant Gordon Bonner, gets in touch with Hank. When Joan arrives to view Mike's remains, she sits in the car with Hank and they head to the site. Upon seeing her son's body, the woman cannot hold back her tears and perhaps even refuses to believe the reality of what is happening. Hank drives his wife back to the airport so that she can return home. The next day, Mike's comrade Bonner comes to Hank's hotel and brings him the Bible that Hank had wanted to take during his first visit to the base. In gratitude, Hank offers him a drink and a chance to talk. During their conversation, the father learns that Mike really had experimented with light narcotics, but he was no worse than the others, and he had no ties whatsoever to Mexican gangs. Joan calls Hank to inform him that a package Mike had mailed to himself has arrived, but Hank asks her not to open it. Afterward, we see Detective Sanders searching for Hank to tell him the news that the case of his son has once again been reassigned to her. She has already obtained a statement of his credit card transactions, which shows that on the day of his return, Mike had gone to a restaurant to eat chicken. When they go to that restaurant, they question the staff. They learn that on that evening, shortly before his death, Mike had been there with at least 2 other people. The Army investigators then provide Sanders with sworn testimonies from the members of Mike's unit, not allowing her to interview them herself. Confronted with the military system and its bureaucracy, she realizes how difficult it is to achieve justice. Next, we are shown how Sanders invites Hank to her home for dinner. The man notices her son and wants to help her put him to bed by reading a story, but his sternness does not allow him to read ordinary fairy tales. So Hank tells the boy a biblical story about David, who fought against Goliath in the Valley of Elah. That evening, Hank once again watches the videos from his son's phone, where short fragments from Iraq are preserved. In them, it is clear that the soldiers often behaved with extreme cruelty. This forces Hank to look at his son in a different light. Eva, the topless bartender whom Hank had previously questioned, recognizes Corporal Steve Penning, one of Mike's comrades, in a photograph. Through this, Hank learns that Mike and Penning had been thrown out of a strip club on the very night Mike was killed. Now, Sanders personally interrogates Mike's fellow soldiers, Penning, Bonner, and Constable Ennis Long. The men admit that they had lied in their earlier testimonies. After Mike had thrown the 4 of them out of the club, he fought with Bonner in the parking lot. Then Mike paid for their food in a restaurant, and afterward they visited a prostitute. He also wanted to buy illegal substances. Hank refuses to believe that Mike's comrades could be involved in his death. Hank and the police discover that another member of Mike's unit, Private Robert Ortiz, has gone AWOL. In the past, he had been involved in drug smuggling and at the moment was driving a blue car. Realizing that the pieces are falling into place, the police immediately move to arrest him. Hank follows the police as they conduct a search at Ortiz's address, but the man manages to escape. However, Hank quickly finds him and begins to beat him mercilessly until detectives intervene. Ortiz is arrested. Soon after, news breaks that Bonner has been found hanged, and in his pocket were Mike's grandfather's watches. Hank's own father had given him those watches when he left for the Vietnam War, and Hank had in turn passed them on to Mike when he left for Iraq. Sanders concludes that Bonner, who also owned a blue car, killed Mike. It also comes to light that Angie, the soldier's wife who had once sought Sanders's help, was murdered by her own husband. Hank sends his son's remains home, and Penning helps him start his truck, reminiscing about Mike. Sanders compares Penning's handwriting with the signature on Mike's last check and realizes that Penning, Bonner, and Long killed Mike and then used his credit card at the restaurant. Penning has already given a statement and entered into a plea deal, but at Sanders' insistence, she and Hank listen to his confession in person. He admits that he stabbed Mike after what seemed like a trivial quarrel. Hank asks the young man about the video where Mike tortured a prisoner. Emotionally detached, Penning explains it by saying that everyone does stupid things. He also tells Hank why Mike was nicknamed Dog. It was because Mike would stick his finger into a prisoner's wound and ask if it hurt. Penning further says that in such a quarrel, or in any similar quarrel, anyone could have died, hinting that Mike may have provoked aggression against himself because of his inner state, depression, and the realization that his soldier friends could not properly return to normal life after combat. As Hank packs up Mike's belongings, he apologizes to Ortiz, who has been honorably discharged. On one of the videos that had continued to be sent to Hank from Mike's phone, it is shown how Mike ran over an Iraqi boy playing in the road, and then the pieces fall into place in Deerfield's mind. He remembers their last conversation, where Mike had begged him to take him away from there. The boy understood that he had killed an innocent person. Mike had also suffered combat trauma, becoming aggressive and emotionally unstable. The father realizes that not only did his son become a victim, but the war itself had crippled these young men morally and psychologically. Hank thanks Sanders and returns home. He sees that Joan has opened the package Mike had mailed to himself, which contained a photograph of his unit and a folded flag. Returning to the flagpole of the local school, Hank asks to have his flag raised again, but this time in a different way. The man, who had lost his son, raises the flag upside down, as though urging us to reflect. The danger lies not only in the war in Iraq, but within the country itself. Young soldiers return broken, society does not notice it, and the nation is destroying itself from within. This is where the film ends. Thank you for watching until the very end.